And that was our short break. We are back now with. We just finished up the finale. If you don't want any spoilers, go back and watch the debates for our top 8 debate on IP games based on movies, TV, and radio. And
Because once we
also,
start talking about it, I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert before you can start moving. And you got five, four, three, two, one.
alright, which means that our winner from the top 8 debate for literature books, or literature and novels, was Lord of the Rings Journeys to Middle Earth. And our winner for last week's debate was Horrified for movies, TV, and radio. With that being said, we are still going to have the same categories because these do work for both of them. Which one matches the theme more accurately? Which one has more meaningful choices? Better art and production, replayability, and ease of play. Now,
And so normally on the last one, the novels, it was all Fantasy Flight games, and we're talking about art and production. It's like, oh, it's a Fantasy Flight game, so of course it's going to win art production against all these other games. Until it got down to Fantasy Flight versus Fantasy Flight. However, with art and production, Horrified holds its own.
it does, absolutely it does. So we're going
For
to have a
not being
fun
a
time.
Fantasy Flight game, the production value of that game is amazing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And not just because it's like, sure, you could argue, oh, maybe the art isn't quite as good as Fantasy Flight level art, but like, man, is it thematic? Does it have such a good
Right.
flavor to it?
So a lot of your stuff is black and white. These movies were made in the 20 or the 30s and the 40s, so of course they're
Right.
all black and white too.
Exactly. So, with that being said, we're gonna have to go down each one of these as well, and this is gonna be a really close call, and we technically don't have tiebreakers for this.
No, we don't.
Now that we think about
So
it.
this is going to be difficult.
All right.
Well, it's a big part of it why we don't have a tiebreaker is for the simple fact that we didn't expect it to. Well, we didn't know what the winner of the novel was going to be. That's the issue.
Yeah.
So,
So,
however, what I can do is I already know the final number for Lord of the Rings, which is hold on, let me see if I can get this open. Yeah, okay. So Lord of the Rings' final number is 18 votes.
okay. Versus
And so
Horrified,
I'm
which
gonna
has been
pull up.
online from a week longer, though.
Yes, but
Yeah.
uh,
More or less, people stop voting
it's
after a
probably not
couple
going to have
days.
more votes because I think this had more votes than the last poll. So let's go over
Right.
here and see where that is. Here we go. Luckily, I have it easy to pull up.
Right. Nice and convenient. I'll go ahead and fill in the
Oh,
dead
yeah,
space.
there we go. Here we go. I got it.
All right. How many did Horrified get?
8.
8 votes. Okay. So even though it
Sitting
was
at 8
online
votes right
longer.
now.
Okay. All right. With that being said, then that will definitely be our tiebreaker if needed. So let's jump into the very first one, matching theme. Which one matches its theme? I'm gonna argue in the case of Lord of the Rings, and
And I'm going to argue in the case of Horrified. And
right.
hear me out. Lord of the Rings, as the issue with it last time,
Yeah.
was it's between the two books. So I don't know why it's called Lord of the Rings, because it isn't Lord of the Rings itself. It's its own story.
Right.
It's because of the IP and stuff like that. I understand that part of it. But it's telling a different story than the IP you're having. And Horrified, along the way, is kind of
It's
simple.
kind of the same idea, right?
But with Horrified, the locations on the map are stuff you see in the movies. Just like in Eldritch Horror, the
Right.
locations on the map are the same ones you see in the books or read in the books.
Right.
The characters are who you see in the movies as well. Some of the characters, and I like this little aspect of it, and I argued this last week as well. Yeah, you don't really see the little girl in, say, The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Right.
However, a lot of the actors and actresses in these stories were reused in different movies. I mean, the Frankenstein monster in Horrified was played by the same guy as the guy who played the Mummy.
Right.
So,
And they're all fairly similar as far as the storyline, so you're able to combine the two pretty
yeah,
easily. But the thing is, like, if you're combining the universes of Frankenstein and Creature from the Black
which,
Lagoon,
which, and to argue my point, has been done. Frankenstein does meet the Wolfman.
Yeah,
Frankenstein
right.
does meet Dracula.
Right. So
The
it's
Mummy and Frankenstein have met, I believe. So yeah, it does match when it comes to that kind of theme.
yeah,
They do.
it creates this kind of like almost like a fictionalized timeline where they do kind of technically overlap, but it's like as far as
But
Horrified, as far as the theme, it
for
never
film,
technically existed, right?
no,
It's just
no, they do exist together. In
well,
the
it's
same
not
way.
one town. It's but
Yeah.
like they've overlapped in that way of the cross promotion in a weird way.
Well,
So in a way, it's
they
like an
have met in the
alternate,
same town. It's just the locations of the said town are different
right?
than in the movie locations. But the
Right.
same conceit. Yeah, you have the same towns in Lord of the Rings, but
Yeah, and
it's
it
more
fall,
because of the map.
but it does also follow an actual fluid timeline. Like it is set in a specific timeline that takes place between the 2 points of literature.
Yeah,
Like
I
that.
give you that.
So I mean, it is true as far as that. But now, how well the mechanisms match that, though? I mean, each each character is very different in Horrified as far as or each monster.
Each monster is different, but also the characters that you use as well
Right.
in Horrified are different because there's one character that your special power is you get 5 actions because normally it's 4.
Yeah.
But you get 5 actions. That's your special power. Where there's another character, you get 3 actions, but you can bounce yourself all around the map however you want.
Right. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Man, like I would almost have to say this is a wash, just because they're
I
both.
would have to agree this
Yeah.
is a watch, just because both of them fit their IP very,
Yeah.
very well.
So if you're looking for a very rich, like IP based experience, if you like any of the campy horror movies, or if you like Lord of the Rings, you're both gonna get a good one in either one.
The only reason, and it's not a thing here because it's just a theme fitting the IP, is I would give over Horrified. It's because it's unique.
Yeah.
This is the first
Sure.
Universal monster movie, in a sense, that I've seen. Yeah, we have, like I said, Abomination era Frankenstein,
Right.
but that kind of fits more in the Lord of the Rings aspect, where it's its own little entity. It's not pulling from a theme per se.
Yeah. Yeah, it had to create its own system and in its
Yeah.
own setting. Yeah. So yeah, no, that's got to be a wash. Let's jump down here to meaningful choices.
And this is where I'm going to give it to Horrified. Hear me out on this.
Okay.
The choices you make in this game play a lot more important in Horrified than Lord of the Rings, and because my argument against Lord of the Rings in the last section was because the app drives the game, not really your choices. Some of your choices that you make in the game open new avenues in the game itself, but the app is like, okay, you found this piece, so let's open up this section over here.
Gotcha. And since you don't, your choices don't necessarily. I mean, yes, your choices progress the storyline, but it also might progress an alternate storyline that might be a red herring or a dead end. Whereas, or it might be your choice makes it harder to win because you're delaying the time.
You have to make the choice of, do I go over here and turn in this piece to fight this monster or smash this coffin for fighting Dracula, or do I go and allow this villager to die because I know he's going to die and raise our terror level up because something bad's about to happen? Do I take that risk? Or do I go save the villager and take the attack against Dracula over here instead of going and smashing his coffin? So there is, and a lot of it too is that you have to talk to your teammates in this one.
Sure. Yeah. I would agree with that. I said meaningful choices with Horrified, yes. As far as the weight of the game goes, and how what your choices do affect the game itself, yeah, I would definitely say so. Art and production. Now
here comes an interesting one.
Yeah, I'll argue Lord of the Rings first. The production, as far as pieces, it's Fantasy Flight, of course. We've discussed this to death now. The miniatures on there are phenomenal. It does have app integration, and the app is really user friendly. It is a reasonable thing, and it works really well with the game itself. It doesn't ever feel like a burden of running the app, and it is atmospheric as well. All the graphic design is beautiful. The art is based off of the books. It just looks fantastic. Whereas Horrified, oh man, does it bring as far as the campy flavor. Everything is like silhouetted.
Black and white.
Yep. I like how we can see my copy of Horrified as well as your copy of Horrified, almost perfectly. Like, there's a reason we both own this game, and that's because one of my biggest
And
pros
here's
for
my,
it.
my argument why Horrified, I think the production value is slightly better, and this is just off the top of my head. You still get a lot of the same thing other than like the app integration in Lord of the Rings. You got minis, you have
Hmm.
plastic standees in there as well, you have
Sure.
your board. It's $40 at maximum. You have this great art production at $40. Lord of the Rings is $100.
No, it's 80.
So, well, 80. Sorry,
Yeah.
it's half the cost, but the art production is still through the roof.
Yeah, I mean it's good for the price, right?
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, like I could go and buy a poster of a Van Gogh painting for $20, or I could
I
go
mean,
buy a Van Gogh painting for
you
thousands
also
of
get the
dollars.
theme coming out, and
Yeah,
so my big thing about it, yeah, you have these plastic standees, but they look gorgeous. The colors pop. Um, and that's really the only color in the game is other than the minis but like your cards that you're using, they're not in color. They use vibrancy color for like the
sure.
bad things that happen, but a lot of it's black and white too. Your villagers are in black and white. The monster minis are gorgeous,
Yeah.
honestly. To me, it's a push, if anything.
It's hard. Like, so I feel like the art and production is how well does it immerse me into the storyline, and even yes, I agree that the minis are better than the minis in Lord of the Rings are better than the minis in Horrified. And the amount of components, sure, it's better. But the thing is, all of the little touches that
Mm-hmm.
Prospero Hall put into it, when you open up the box and
It
there's
gives you the
one
warning.
panel giving you the warning the very same way that you would as an old horror movie, it knows it's campy, it knows it's cheesy, but it never makes fun of itself. It
And the thing is,
includes every bit of flavor.
and the thing about it too is that yeah,
Excuse
they're
me.
bringing black and white movies to life, so they're adding color because not a lot of people want to see monochrome.
Right.
But the colors are just so vibrant, just on the
Yep.
board alone. It's easy to find anywhere you want to go on the board. Okay, I need to go over here. I need to go over here. It's so vibrant.
Right.
The different locations actually look different.
Yeah.
For
Hmm.
as little production that they have in there, you got your minis, you got your cardboard to stand out. But I mean, compared to Fantasy Flight, there's less stuff in this game.
Right.
But the production value of it is just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we, if anything, I mean, I don't know if I would still probably call it a wash, but man, like Horrified really, like the skull on the cover, like
Yeah,
that silhouette of the skull, like based on all like the how all the characters are laid out and how it makes the skull like that's a beautiful touch. The board itself, all of the characters that are pulled in from the other storylines and how they integrate with it, it all of that adds up to one of those just fantastic experiences that
and the
based on
fact
art
that
and
they
production.
added a funny horror movie into this, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein into this game, just
Right.
makes it amazing to me because the Wilbur and Chick characters are the Abbott and Costello characters from the Abbott and
Right.
Costello meet Frankenstein.
Yeah. Yeah, I that's oh man, it's so good. It's yeah,
Honestly, we're arguing for Horrified more than Lord of the Rings, but that's because we've said it ad nauseum earlier. Just the
yeah.
Fantasy Flight production itself gave it a wash over the other three games that weren't
Right.
Fantasy Flight. And this time, Horrified can hold its own against it. But to me, it's still a wash. The art and production for both games are just amazing.
Yeah, and the app bringing in the atmosphere, it's really cool like the sounds and everything. It's got to be a wash, but man, do they both like set a high bar.
Oh, I know.
Um like who
Especially for me, for a non-Fantasy Flight game to set that kind of a high bar, it's just like, what are you doing, Prospero Hall? How?
Stop being so good. How dare
Right?
you?
To the point where both of us, you like the Funkoverse game, but you're not a huge fan of Funko Pops either.
Right.
I like the Funkoverse game. I'm not a huge fan of Funko Pops as well.
Yeah.
They have another game coming out through Funkoverse called Back to the Future, Back in Time. That I'm like, once it goes on sale, I'm gonna buy it. It's
Yeah.
not Funko Pops, thank God. It's miniatures, but it's Prospero Hall, and just
And
as
that
we've talked about
yeah,
Phil
that
Walker
says it.
Harding, where we get intrigued by any game he comes up with.
Yeah.
Prospero Hall, any game they come up with, is just like,
Yeah, exactly. It's so intense. So yeah, I mean, Prospero Hall really knocked it out of the park with this, but because of how good a quality the Fantasy Flight stuff is, it's going to be a wash. All right,
all right, now here comes the tough one,
replayability.
replayability. Because your argument for replayability is going to be completely different than my argument for replayability, and it's because you're saying the campaign and the fact that the games don't change that much against Horrified.
Right.
But for me, the replayability aspect of it too is how easier am I going to get it to the table? And Horrified plays in 45 minutes,
Sure.
at most, and I can get that to the table more than I know for a fact I can get Lord of the Rings. I don't own Lord of the Rings at the moment. I do want to own it. Don't get me wrong.
Now, let's clarify this real quick before we get too much into it. The ability to get it to the table, is that replayability or is that ease of play?
Getting it to the table is not easy. Ease of play is learning how the game works.
Okay.
And how easy it is to get new players to play the game.
Gotcha.
For
Okay.
me, replayability is about replaying it, getting it to the table. How easier is it to get to the table? Lord of the Rings does have the campaign going for it, so
Yeah.
But just like the problem with other campaign games, you have to have a set group that you want to play with, the ability
Sure.
to keep going playing in the campaign. I can play the replayability for me for Horrified is because it's such a simple game to learn for that, and that's an easy to play, I know, but it's such a simple game to learn. I can get new people to play this game and enjoy it, and then they're like, "Ooh, we should do that again." And it's easier for me to get this to the table than any Fantasy Flight game, to be truthfully honest. And it's just because of that ease of play. Yes, if they get expansions, it'd make it amazing. I mean, I would love the Blob in this. It would be interesting how they add the Blob to it.
Right. But let's say hypothetical expansions, right? So you just argued in the case of ease of play. So let's go to ease of play instead, because it is easier to get Horrified to the table. I feel like even though all of the monsters are variable, that's part of the draw of wanting to play it, which is a big plus in that. Whereas the ease of play, it's not like Lord of the Rings is a difficult game. It is easy to play.
It is easy to play, but the grasping of it is a little harder.
Yeah, the checks, that's the biggest part of it, and the fact that you're going to be following everything at direction of the app. I agree. We give ease of play to Horrified, but now as far as replayability, the ability to play it 20, 30, 40 times in a row, even with, let's say they make expansions for both of them, because we got to give the benefit of the doubt. Yes, more monsters would be fun, and it would spark that interest in wanting to get it to the table for Horrified, but expansions would progress the storyline of Lord of the Rings. So even though Horrified technically is still going to win this, I do think replayability would be Lord of the Rings because of that. I would, it's more, you're able to replay it more by progressing the storyline. Sure, yes, you would want the same group, yeah, but that one group would have that immersive experience, and then once you finish the story, like, yeah, now I need to continue my characters even more, and expansions for that would be better. Whereas in Horrified, like, you'd be excited to play it more because of the new monsters, but it wouldn't change the game itself. It wouldn't add anything new necessarily.
You're saying what's driving you for replayability. What I'm saying is what is going to make you want to play it more, and it's because of the ease of play is going to want me to make it more, and it's because of just how fun it is.
Well, I'm thinking though the wanting to learn what happens next in the story. That's like, you don't stop a movie because it's like, oh, what cases, Dick Tracy going to solve this week?
Okay,
no,
I have a question for you then.
Okay.
How many times have you played Horrified?
No, this is not comparable.
No. Let me ask. How many times have you played Horrified?
It's the ease of play is why that.
How many times have you played Horrified? You're not answering the question because
you know it. The ease of play, the ability to get it to the table.
Yeah, that's the thing. Ease of play makes it replayable.
No, I'm talking the wanting to continue playing it more and more every time you played it.
Have we continued? We haven't even finished.
How many times have you played Rock, Paper, Scissors?
I don't like Rock, Paper, Scissors, so I don't play it all that often.
Okay. How many have you played it from when you were born to now? Probably hundreds of times.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't make it replayable.
That's not my point here. Replayability means how likely are you going to replay the game?
That would be Lord of the Rings.
Base game, I have a better chance of playing Horrified than I do Lord of the Rings. For one thing, I don't own it. For another thing, I wouldn't start a new campaign because we got 1, 2, 3, 4 5 campaign games that I'm in the middle of that I haven't played.
But I've played Betrayal at House on the Hill more times than I've played Horrified. I've played Pandemic Legacy more times. I played Charterstone more times because I like the story. The story is what makes me replay it.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're arguing, the story is replayability and it's good, but we're not discussing campaign games. We're discussing what is more likely to get to the table.
No, campaign games have that very strong. No, it has a very strong advantage. That's the point of campaign games, is to make them almost infinitely replayable. Now,
I have 6 campaign games that I'm in the middle of.
Charterstone.
I haven't finished a single one of them.
But here's the thing, though. Like, I get your argument, but the ability to get it to the table versus continuing to play it time and time again, like Carcassonne, I've played it to death.
Hold on, real quick.
But
we've had this argument about hot dogs and sandwiches, so I'm going to look up this definition for you and prove my point.
Okay.
Replay.
You know, we're arguing unnecessarily. Just because your definition is moot doesn't mean that.
No, your definition is mute.
I'm able to play. You have played, and I can tell you this right now.
Replayability, especially with reference to a video game, the quality of fact of being suitable for or worth playing more than once.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. That I don't need a campaign to make it more likely to get to the table. I could play that game over and over again for how simple it is.
How many times have you played Horrified?
Honestly, I could pull up since I bought it last August. It's probably sitting about 10, 11, 12 times.
10 or 11 times. Okay. I have a game.
Mind you, it's not even a year old.
Right. I have a game that I know you've played more than 12 times. Okay? And
Nyrum doesn't count.
Nope. I know a game that you have played more than 12 times. And if that's what you're saying, that you've played it more, makes it more replayable, are you willing to admit that Hit Me is more replayable than Horrified? Are you willing to admit that? Because you have played Hit Me more than this.
In my defense, when it comes to Hit Me, I had to play it more because I was trying to sell it for you.
But you've played it more.
Not by choice.
Yes, by choice. You could have walked away.
Not by choice.
You're doing it as a favor.
My ticket to the convention.
Okay. It's still replayable. It is more replayable. Because I could play Hit Me 4 or 5 times in the time of one round of that.
But see, that's not just the fact that you can play it more. What I'm talking about is getting to the table more.
Yes, I get it to the table all the time.
I can take Horrified to your house and probably get people to play it. I could take it here on our game night and get people to play it. I could take it to our couple friend and get them to play it.
Yes.
I could take it to Bryce and his wife and get them to play it.
Sure.
So that's the for me, that's what replayability is how can I get it to be played? And the fact is, like, people are like, oh, we lost. Hey, let's do that again.
Okay.
It's really simple. Other than Lord of the Rings, okay, I'm done. Let's wait.
And I can do that with Rock, Paper, Scissors. Or Hit Me.
I'm sorry. I think Horrified is just much more easy. Yes, more content is in Lord of the Rings, but replayability is the definition of getting the game played again. And Horrified, 9 times out of 10, will be easier to get played on the table than any Fantasy Flight production, including Lord of the Rings. I have Star Wars Rebellion. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I have yet to get that to the table.
Okay. But that doesn't mean that you might not want to play. If I play one game of Horrified versus one game of a campaign game, I'm going to want to play the campaign game more. And I want to get back to the table more.
That's not necessarily true. I like Lord of the Rings. I'm not going out of my way to pick it up and play the campaign.
I would rather play... I would rather play Lord of the Rings than I would another game of Horrified. I would.
I'd rather play another game of Horrified than Lord of the Rings.
And that's our personal preference.
That, to me, it goes along the point of the meaningful choices and the ease of play. Horrified's much easier to play, and the meaningful choices in that game make me drive the game rather than the app driving you the game.
regardless of whether we agree with this or not, just give it to me anyway. And I'll tell you why. Because it's Horrified still going on. But give it to me. Campaign is more replayable than a non-campaign game.
Not necessarily.
Okay. If I limited you to the same scenario in Gloomhaven.
Oh, I play Gloomhaven because I like the game more. That's beside the point. But here's a scenario for you.
Okay.
Werewolf Legacy is an actual campaign game. It's Werewolf in legacy form.
Yes.
You've looked it up and researched it.
Yes.
Which would you rather play more, Werewolf, Legacy, or Horrified?
If I played it once, and I enjoyed the game as I enjoyed the game, I would let's say if I enjoyed the game at anywhere near as close as I like Horrified the game, right?
Okay.
I would rather play Werewolf Legacy.
I wouldn't.
And that's because I know you don't like Werewolf Legacy. You don't like bluffing games.
But my thing is, I would pick Horrified over Betrayal Legacy, and I had an amazing time with Betrayal Legacy. I just like Horrified as a game, and it gets to the table better, and that's what replayability is.
So which one's more replayable, Pandemic or Pandemic Legacy?
Pandemic Legacy, yes.
Because it's a campaign game. It's the same game, but a campaign game, and therefore making it more replayable.
The reason being is because nothing changes. If they made a Horrified Legacy and a Horrified base game, of course I'm going to pick the Legacy because it's going to be better.
It's a campaign game. Right, it's more replayable.
But you're arguing the same game to the same game.
Yes.
You're arguing Lord of the Rings campaign versus Horrified, and I'm saying...
And I feel like both of those games...
Nice,
I'm saying I like both of the games the same. I like Horrified, I like Lord of the Rings, but the fact that Lord of the Rings is a campaign game, it's more replayable.
Personally, just because something's a campaign game doesn't mean I'm going to get it back to the table. I like Charterstone. I still haven't got it back to the table. I play Wingspan more than I play anything else on that shelf.
But just because you can't get it to the table doesn't make it less replayable.
But you're saying campaign games are going to make people more than likely to replay it. But that's not not true. I know people who stopped playing Time Stories, that's a campaign game, before they even finished it because they did not enjoy the mechanism. They didn't even finish the first game.
Ithri brought up a very good point. He says, I don't know that I'd say liking playing a game means it's more replayable. And that's what I'm saying.
But
is
see, the definition
the ability
of replayability is the more likelihood of getting into the table. I like Horrified, which means it's going to get to the table more than Lord of the Rings. That's the definition of replayability. It has to go with liking.
No, it doesn't have to go with liking, because let's say another thing. Let's say you're reading a comment review about let's take forums in the case, like another different completely obscure example. Let's say you take you go online, you read a one paragraph comment about a game you like, and it's like, yeah, this game is really fun because of this. Versus if you're reading a novel that has a number of chapters. Well, once you finish reading that paragraph or that chapter, are you going to continue reading the story, or are you going to read another comment that says the same thing?
Here's the thing. You're arguing in circles that campaign is the only reason Lord of the Rings is more replayable. And
no,
it's not.
I'm saying it's a solid game, both of them, but because they have a change in story on that, it makes it more replayable.
It does not make it more replayable.
This is a discussion point that we should put up online. I will put this on Board Game Revolution. We're still going to give it to Horrified. We gotta bring this episode to a close. This is getting ridiculous, and you're standing your ground way too much. You're not willing to budge. But
my thing is,
no. We've heard your point. We've heard your point. Now, I'm turning off the mic. You're cutting you off.
But you're not changing your ground either. So don't try to put this on me.
I'm saying
you're saying campaign is the only driving force of replayability, and it is not.
It's not. I'm saying.
But that's your argument. Is campaign is the only driving force.
If I play a game with anybody, if I play Pandemic and I play Pandemic Legacy is the one that's coming back because they want to see where the story goes. It is going to be replayed.
Not necessarily. There are different people, and this is why it's a matter of opinion. And that's why I always put, like, when we upgrade the thing, when I put the podcast digital or for the audio viewers, it's because it is in our opinion. And the fact of the matter is, campaign is not going to get it more to the table for me. I got to like the game to begin with. And as much as I like Lord of the Rings, Horrified, even though it doesn't have a story, even though it doesn't have a campaign, I would rather play than Lord of the Rings.
You would rather play. If you take personal bias aside, that does not make it more replayable. The same game 12 times versus...
The definition of replayability, it's more than likely to get played again.
No, for you, but not for anybody.
You want me to pull the definition again? Here is the definition. The quality or fact of being suitable for or worth playing more than once.
Yes. So, what would you rather play 12 times? Pandemic Legacy or Pandemic? Which would you rather play?
Again, you're arguing apples to apples. We're arguing apples to oranges. You're saying
No.
No. You're saying Lord of the Rings is more replayable because it has a campaign. I'm arguing the fact that it is not Now, if you were saying, if I was playing Lord of the Rings, Journey to Middle-earth, first edition, where there is no campaign, versus Lord of the Rings, Journey to Middle-earth, with the campaign, yeah, of course I'm going to pick the campaign. If you're saying Horrified over
That's what I'm saying.
But the campaign is not the importance for me. It's the game.
That makes it more replayable, though. It
does not.
If you take two games that you like the same and took out the biased, which is Pandemic and Pandemic Legacy, that you even said they're the same game at the beginning, which they are. If you took out the bias of which game you liked more, which one is more replayable?
See, but you're
the campaign.
The bias out of what I like, but what you're saying here, and this is the big problem, is that you're saying, yeah, they're the same game. Yeah, of course I'm going to pick the campaign because it's just going to give me more viability in the game.
Yes.
However, I can make Horrified different. I can play it with 2 and just make it easy, or I can make it 4 and make it hard. There is replayability in the difficulty level.
But can you make it as different as a campaign game? No, you can't.
But the thing is, we don't know if Lord of the Rings is different.
We do. I do.
The first scenario.
No, I've seen multiple scenarios be played. It is different. It does progress the storyline. Therefore, it's more replayable. So we will take this. We gotta stop this. This is ridiculous. I'll make a post online. We will see what everybody else says. We will not add in any of our input. I'll confirm with you as I'm posting it to make sure that it's not leading a bias in any way. And we'll see what the viewers say. And we will address this on one of our Wednesday Chits and Giggles, and we will discuss this. And
just to let people know, just because that was a very long-winded argument and it lasted for frickin' ever, Horrified is the overall IP champion.
Yes, it is. I completely agree. Horrified is awesome. It's amazing. It is not as replayable as that, but it is still a phenomenal game. No.
Get that trash out of here.
Yeah. So next week, we're gonna start on Monday. On Monday, we're gonna start a new segment that we are gonna be calling Board Game Breakdown, where we will take a single board game or a designer or a topic or mechanism, whatever, and really break it down to its fundamentals and talk about probably why we like it, but a lot of the different aspects involved with it. For example, if we pick a game, we're gonna talk about its mechanisms, as well as its designer, its artist, its publisher, everything we can, its expansions that we know about, and we're going to really break it down and talk and just do like a deep dive into that board game. So that'll be the Monday Board Game Breakdown. Next Wednesday will be our Chits and Giggles podcast.
Thursday.
We're going to change it to Thursday because it's going to be what video games would we like to see changed into board games, or making a board game implementation of it. And next Thursday,
we're also going to have a special guest to help us. That's why it's been moved to Thursday.
That's right. So join us in on Thursday for that. And next Friday will be our top 8 co-op games, where we're set to have this argument all over again.
So, after all that, and probably one of our longer podcasts, thank you everybody for joining us. You can find us at everydayboardgames2020@gmail.com, everydayboardgames2020 on YouTube for the re-uploads of these videos, as well as you can find us on Podbean under Everyday Board Games Podcast.
All right. And thank you all for tuning in. And if you want to watch us on live, of course, twitch.tv/everydayboardgames, sorry. And I normally am filming around somewhere between noon to about 2 o'clock every weekday, Mountain Standard Time, in Daylight Savings Time. So,
MDT, Danny. MDT.
yeah, Mountain Daylight Time. Sorry, but it is 2:30 here, and we're gonna end this. We have to go make amends somehow. We need to play like a good co-op game together or something.
Well, we have to set up the brackets for the next episode.
Sure. So we'll be doing that, and then I will make that post on Board Game Revolution.
To let everybody know, I am going to make a decision that we need to find another tiebreaker mechanism other than replayability because this thing is broken down 2 weeks in a row.
Right. Exactly. So yeah. Well, I mean, the good thing is, I mean, there's very few things now. Actually, no. Next week won't work because there is going to be campaigns included in the co-op game. So, yeah, we'll have to figure out something.
Well, we'll figure out something other than replayability.
Probably like teamwork or something.
We can take that out because your argument point. Yeah, the Pandemic versus Pandemic Legacy. I'm going to choose Pandemic Legacy just because
it's more replayable. Yeah.
Yeah.
But.
But to me, the reason why Horrified to me again is more replayable is I like the theme better too. Not to do the argument, but our definition of replayability is a lot different. So that's why we're taking it out.
Yep. Yeah. Mine's right. You're wrong. Exactly. So no, I'm just kidding.
We both know you're wrong.
Anyway,
the definition says you're wrong.
No, it doesn't. It's so ridiculous. Anyway, we gotta drop this. Mommy and Daddy still love each other. We're gonna go with this, you know. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. This has been Everyday Board Game Podcast with Daniel.
And Daniel. Have a great one.
Have a great one.